Well, great to be with you today, Alex. Really enjoyed the film and your story. Um, I wanted to jump in. I was fascinated. You talked about being kind of at home in Denver and seeing something on TV that sparked a dream you had of summiting Everest. How did that come about?
Well, it's very interesting because I was a teenager sitting on a couch in Omaha, Nebraska, after a lengthy soccer practice, eating a bag of Doritos and drinking a double gulp of Mountain Dew, and saw something on Everest. And I said at that moment right there that one day I'll climb that mountain. And many years transpired out of sight, out of mind. Then I ended up on a couch in Denver, Colorado. I wasn't into rock climbing or any of the outdoor stuff and more traditional sports. I was a college athlete and stuff. And then for some reason, I was watching daytime television. It could have been, I have no idea what it was. Nothing to do with mountaineering. So it was just some kind of talk show. And for some reason, that recollection just dawned in my head that I made a promise to myself as a child that I was going to go climb Everest. The next day I started. So I had no idea what I was doing. I climbed a 14er out here in the middle of January with snowboarding gear on, snowboarding boots, way overweighted, sweating my butt off. No idea what I was doing, post holing up to my waist, but I made it to the top. And then, the process started of going through formal training and taking, mountaineering school and then climbing other mountains like Rainier and Denali and Aconcagua in Argentina and these kind of things on that lengthy journey to get to eventually making the quest Nepal a reality and climbing Mount Everest.
So I think you touched on it a little bit. Obviously, you had to do quite a bit of training. What was that process like? Did you take classes? You talked about climbing one of the 14ers here and all around. What other kind of stuff did you do to prepare physically?
Yeah, so the actual technical aspect of things, takes quite a bit of time. You go through do what mountaineering training, wilderness survival, crevasse and glacier travel, and these kind of things. And so then with regards to the 14ers, I would do those all in the wintertime because I didn't want it to be nice up there because I wanted
Yeah.
to be most realistic, right? So I did them in February and January and when it's pretty nasty. Then I said, okay, well, now we have to get onto glaciated peaks and to use some of these skills that I learned. And so I went out to Mount Rainier, to climb that out in Washington. And then I went down to Argentina and climbed the highest mountain of South America down there to test myself at altitude because you don't know until you go. You can train, cardio, you can be physically tough, you can do strength training, but at the end of the day, one of the biggest limiting factors on whether or not you're successful on Everest or any high peak like that is your ability to acclimatize. And you just don't know till you go. And you're born with that. So you have to test it out. Then I went to Denali, and Denali is extremely tough mountain up in Alaska, and that's the highest mountain in North America. To kind of see, all right, what would it be like to test myself with just a two-man expedition, lugging 140 pounds up the hill by yourself with one other person, and to really go through a long, arduous expedition style grind on nothing but snow, glaciers, and crevasses. And so I was humbly honored and fortunate to have summited that mountain. Then when you actually get into the Everest side of things, I started training 7 days a week for a whole year, no exceptions, took no days off, 1 to 3 hours a day, stopped drinking alcohol, did everything possible to stay hyper focused on the physical aspect because I didn't want that to be a potential limiting factor on my success of making it up Everest because your odds are against you anyway. And so, I was doing 1 to 2,000 step ups with 60 to 75 pound pack on my back. I was running over a marathon every week, sometimes two marathons every week, and I was doing hill sprints and I was doing climbing around here with a heavy pack on and weight training and everything you can imagine on a 7 day regiment that I just repeated every single week religiously until I jumped on a plane to go to Kathmandu.
Do you think did you develop kind of an interest in mountain climbing? Do you think it's something you'll keep doing now that you've gone through all the training?
Yeah, I think so. I developed the interest after that recollection, after that, commitment to honor a promise to myself. And since that time, it's always been a thing in my blood now are the mountains, So I will definitely continue to do mountaineer, and I will continue to actually climb some more of these seven summits, as they're called, the highest peaks on each continent. And possibly, a little spoiler alert, looks like there'll be some other quests coming down the road, and potentially some of those will be engaged in that as well. But we'll let you know about that at a later date. Um, but yeah, there's going to be other things with regards to the quest. We're going to, I was a dive instructor, or I was in a dive instructor program. I was a dive master. So scuba diving is a big passion of mine. And of course, there's a lot of things to explore under the water as well, not just, going up to great heights. So a lot of that is going to be all unraveled and unpacked in the future quests as they come along.
Was it always when you committed that you were going to go up Everest, the idea that you would film it and make a documentary about it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Matter of fact, when I was standing on top of Denali, I had this aha moment. It was 11:30 at night. I was up on the summit all by myself with one other person staring out at the beautiful Alaska range. And I said, I can't just do this for me to stand up here and take in this amazing view. I have to do something bigger than just doing that. And that's when the quest idea started dawning in my head. I said, why don't I mix some of my past experiences and my love and passion for filmmaking, along with my formal training in mountaineering, and let's give people an opportunity to get the closest possible experience, either on a 2D side of things or a virtual reality side of things, of what it's like to go to Nepal and to go on a 52-day Everest expedition, because I know that the majority of the world will never have that opportunity. So if I could bring that to them and show them something authentic, that was my objective. If I wasn't going to film it, I probably wouldn't have gone at that time.
So a lot of this film, what I enjoyed was kind of a rich exploration of the country and the people and the culture. Did you do a lot of research before going over there?
Yeah, I did actually. I did quite a bit. And Nepal is a fascinating place. It's not very well known outside of Southeast Asia, especially in the West, in Europe, South America, North America. Very little people know anything about Nepal. And most people here in the United States, for example, couldn't even tell you where it's at on a map. So if you think Nepal, of course, Everest, and that's kind of what gives Nepal its reputation and gets its only visibility to the most part in the West. And then maybe some Doctor Strange films, because they filmed there in Nepal. But outside of that, there's not much information known about Nepal. So it's a very fascinating place because it's kind of a trichotomy. It's actually the birthplace of Buddhism. It's not India. Most people think India, but it's actually Nepal. But yet it's a Hindu country. Over 82% of the population is actually Hindu. And on top of that, it's governed by Chinese style communism. So it is this really interesting mix of these three things that you think there's no way that could work, but it does. And so as you unravel and peel back the onion further, you just get more and more fascinated and go deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole about what Nepal is all about.
How did actually being there compare to kind of the pre-research you did? Was it different than you expected? Kind of what you were expecting?
Completely different. Once you land in Kathmandu, it is a different world. I mean, first of all, you're going back almost 50 years in time. You're talking about dirt roads, you're talking about no traffic lights, you're talking about complete organized chaos, is what I like to call it. And you are just inundated instantly with sights, smells, dust, things that will just give you cognitive dissonance if you're not ready for it. And yeah, you have to get right away into adapting immediately, because everything I learned about the country from a cultural standpoint, historical standpoint, that's fine. But it's kind of like going to school for business and then being engaged in business. There's a big difference.
Aside, setting aside kind of a going up Everest, what was one of your favorite memories or experiences in country?
I would have to say the rich culture and the kind-heartedness of the Sherpa people. The Sherpa people that live in the Khumbu Valley, a lot of people think Sherpa means porter, mountain guide, or climber. It's not. It's an ethnic group, no different than a Native American Indian, for example, like the Cherokee or Arapaho Indians. They are the most generous people that you will meet. Very few people have I met in my life that are as generous, as sincere, and as salt of the earth, as I'd like to say, people. What you see is what you get. Open, honest, and that was very, very endearing, as well as their spirituality. I mean, there's no way, whether or not what religious affiliations or beliefs you may have, their spirituality and their connection to the country, to the mountain, to the land, and to the elements around them rubs off on you over the course of 52 days, no question about it.
Obviously, getting to the top of Everest is a pretty grueling experience. What did it mean to you when you got to the top?
Well, it was a release. Very few people know this. Now more people will know this now that I'm telling you this. But when I got up there, one of the first things I did, matter of fact, the absolute first thing I did is I gave my respects to the mountain, and you see that in the film. The Sherpa people call Mount Everest Chomolungma or Chomomia Lungsama, which means Goddess Mother of the World, because it's really the physical embodiment of the Goddess Mother of the World. It's not some abstract concept of the sky or the wind or the weather like we have in the West. That is the Mother of the World. So out of respect for the Mother of the World and being humbly honored and fortunate to be able to stand on top of her, first thing I did is I bowed and gave my respect to the Goddess Mother of the World. Then I broke down and cried. It was a release since I was a teenager sitting in Omaha, Nebraska, that I had to honor this promise to myself, because if I didn't, then I would never feel like I've achieved, what I set out to do. But more importantly, how can I honor my commitments to other people if I can't keep the word to my own self? So that's one of the things that, I just sat there and I cried in my goggles, at 29,032 feet. And then I took in the most amazing view I've ever seen in my life. And that changes you, because you can't even describe it, how it imprints you through your eyeballs. And I had the whole summit to myself for 45 minutes with just my good buddy Tashi, who is now a brother from another mother father, as he likes to say.
How did the experience of summiting the mountain compare to what you maybe expected going into it? Obviously, you talked about all your training. Was it similar or?
No. I've seen everything I could possibly can about Everest. I've studied everything I can. I've obsessed about it. I've dreamed about it. I stayed up at night about it, fascinating about it. But as soon as I stepped foot in the Khumbu Icefall, which is the bottom part of the mountain above base camp, everything changes. Everything you think you know, everything you're prepared for, throw it out the window, and you better just, roll up the sleeves and get ready to just be willing to gamble, and to willing to grind it out and to motivate and to stay focused at the job at hand, because it was harder than I envisioned. It was more dangerous than I envisioned. It was more relentless than I envisioned. But on the same token, it was also more majestic and more beautiful than I could ever have fathomed.
What's one thing you'll take away from this experience?
One thing that I'll take away from this experience is that forever my life, I look at it a different perspective. The things that bother you on a daily basis don't bother you as much. The things that seem so severe aren't as severe anymore, because in order to make it to the summit of Everest, you have to go 20% harder than you ever have in anything you've ever done in your life. Otherwise, you're not going to make it. But that same token goes that if you go 20% harder than you've ever pushed yourself, you might not come back down alive. So you're on a very fine razor edge margin on whether or not you're going to make it, come back down, or don't make it, or never to be seen again. And so that perspective and living through that process will forever change me, no question about it.
How did you feel when you were putting this journey together on film, when you got the kind of finished film, The Quest, Nepal?
Yeah, fortunate, because we got 63 hours of footage, and I was humbly honored to have gotten that much footage over the course of 63 days. And I knew that, okay, now we have something. Now it's a ton of sifting, cataloging, and deciding how we want to skin this cat. But I knew that we had something that would be hopefully indicative of what the experience was like, in Kathmandu, and the cultural aspects, and trekking to base camp and climbing the mountain, and all the historical and cultural significance around that. But also something that was hopefully entertaining and educational at the same time. Because if it didn't fulfill those two things, then I didn't do my job right. Because really, that's what the quest is all about, is to take people on these epic educational thrill rides, to teach them stuff about these rarely seen places around the world that they normally wouldn't know about, think about, or ever see anything about. And so hopefully, we've achieved some of that over the course of 72 minutes.
Is that kind of the the goal, the one thing you'd like people to take away from the film is understanding more about the, what spoke to me was I love the exploration of the culture and the people, and really spinning a narrative more than just, you feel all those things about going up the mountain, but you learn a little bit about the place and the people. And I could tell your passion for that. Is that what you want people to take away, the complete picture of the place?
Absolutely, that's the most important part. The mountain climbing, the beautiful scenes of climbing the mountain, what it takes to climb the mountain, that's more of just a hook to hopefully get the audience to see the rest of the story. And especially, like you said, the cultural aspects, because that to me is what the quest is all about, is to revealing these, cultural things, these landscapes, these historical elements about these various locations. That to me is the most important thing. It's not about, climbing the mountain. The mountain is just part of the process, to kind of show people what Nepal is all about. But you're absolutely right, man. The cultural aspect of it is to me the most important thing.
So you kind of touched on it a little bit, but it seems like you want to take this idea of the quest and make it a little bit of an ongoing series. What kind of things are next for you?
Yeah, we've got the next 3 or 4 installments laid out. And so this is all going to be dependent on uh, timing, what time of year you go, because a lot of these things and places want to go to are very seasonal. Secondly, geopolitical situations on the ground. Can we go to these countries? For example, me going to Russia right now with a blue passport, not very likely. And then, of course, what are the logistics of making these expeditions happen during that time of the year? But we have, 3 or 4 of these already identified, already most of the uh, pre-production development laid out. And so at the end of this summer, beginning of the fall, we'll start to, go into pre-production for the next quest. And what we want to do is make this an ongoing immersive series for at least another 10 years, if at all possible, possibly longer, depending on how much, desire and interest is to see it, essentially.